Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this ongoing weekly class. Again, I appreciate you all joining us and being regulars. For those that aren't regulars, welcome too. So we are on, we just did the halacha last time on day 82, page 238. And we went through the halacha, very interesting discussion that we had. What we ended with last time was with the quote, and I want to talk about it. And I said I want to get into growing your humility, live like a king, right? That's what I said last time. That's what I wanted to start with today. So the quote was, right, what is considered false humility, right? That was a quote from the Belzer Rebbe, right? A falsely humble person considers himself insignificant and considers everyone else as insignificant as himself, right? So that is a false humility. How do you know if you are going in the right track of being humble or not, right? How do you know if you are really not following? Because we all want to, unless we have some social issues, we all want to consider ourselves to be humble people, right? Not maybe we're not humble, we're not arrogant, right? We're not self-absorbed, even though some of us are, let's be honest, right? But to a certain degree, right, we all want to strive to not have those character traits, right? Yes, there are some people that want to have those character traits, those people that excel, and those those people need a different talking, right? But for our conversation today, we're talking about your typical person. So how do you know? What's a litmus test? How do you know if you're on the right track or not? A lot of times the test is not how you consider yourself, but the question is, how do you consider other people? Right? And that's what he's saying. If you consider other people also insignificant as yourself, listen, we're all nothing, right? Right? You hear speeches, people, we're just all nothings, right? We all have to don't include yourself with other people, right? About you're trying to be humble. You always have to consider the other person as a tzalel makim, as a made in God's image, and other people as people that are growing people. Don't consider them as insignificant. And in general, as I mentioned, being considered insignificant is not really a character trait of humbleness. When you consider yourself insignificant, and yes, you'll probably consider other people as insignificant also, because that's not humility. That's a lack of self-esteem, right? That's it's knocking yourself down. Or it could be actually the highest level of haughtiness, of arrogance, by thinking that you're being humble, by thinking that you're being insignificant. So you say, yeah, nothing, whatever, I don't need anything, right? But it's really a way of building yourself up that other people should think that you really are something, because they think that you're the greatest humble person. Should I use my thumb? Right? Right? You sometimes the biggest level, Jim's playing around with his thumb over here, right? Sometimes the biggest level of being arrogant, of being arrogant. Sometimes one of the ways of being arrogant is by acting in a way that would portray you as a humble person, right? But you're doing it because you want everybody to think that you're a humble person, and that way you feel better about yourself, and you feel like, look, I'm a great person because I'm a humble person. I'm a great person because I'm a humble person. That's arrogance, right? And when we group other people with us as we are insignificant or whatever, right? That's a way of recognizing that you're considering yourself as insignificant or trying to work on your humbleness is a false humbleness. Right? It's being falsely. It's a false being humble. And because, as we mentioned before, being humble is not necessarily thinking that you're nothing and that you're insignificant. Some of the greatest rabbis were the most humble people. Moshe Rabbeinu, Anami Kaladam, was the most humble man of all times. He did not think that he was insignificant, right? He did not at all, right? He knew exactly what his purpose was. He knew that he put his foot down when he felt it was the right time, right? He was humble when he felt it was the right time. Humbleness is not considering yourself insignificant. Humbleness, as we explained, is a reminder that you have a responsibility, realizing that you have a greater level of responsibility, not thinking that you are better than other people because of what you have, the wealth you have, the strength you have, the capabilities, music, voice, artistic, intelligence, looks, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, that talents that you have, right? You don't think you're better than other people because of those. You realize that those are responsibility, right? If you look at Live Like a King, right? It's a very interesting paragraph, couple paragraphs, right? Of forces that are capable of propelling our negative thoughts from our brain into our mouth and out into the world, right? Anger is the most powerful of all. Someone who can contain his anger can usually contain his words long enough to consider their impact, right? And decide whether or not something needs to be said. But how does someone with a short fuse, right, access his self-control? Right? What page? Sorry, Emily. Page 239. Right? Page 239. Apologize, guys. Page 239. We're on page 239. So I just read the first paragraph. So the question is like this, right? Self-control is the most powerful way to be able to diffuse, not allowing your anger to take control of yourself. But how do we do that? If someone has a short fuse, someone is lacking self-control, what are some tips of being able to access this great character trait of self-control? Right? He or she can learn from a short-tempered king, a righteous ruler whose falling causes him endless grief. Sefer Hamidos, right, relates that the king's trusted servants help him overcome his problems by intervening whenever the king's temper begins to rise. The servant succeeds by showing the king 3 lines. And this is what I want to talk about. Number 1, always remember that you are merely a creature and not a creator. You are a creature and not a creator. Always remember, right, that you are flesh and blood and will eventually perish. And always remember that there will be mercy for you in the future only if you are mercy on others. Right? Keeping in mind that there's not above your fellow man, that you're not above your fellow man, that God is above us all, can help us through, right, the illusions that we have the right of getting other people. And this really falls in line with what it means to be humble. People that have a short fuse, people that need to say something, people that need to respond, people that feel it's their duty to lash out, right? And they're doing it because it's their duty. They're doing it because it's good for the community. It's good for our friends. It's good for our school. Whatever it is, right? They have to remember these 3 things. And I'm not saying there's not a time to say something. Of course, we have to say something. But these 3 things, right, are also litmus tests to remind yourself that you are but just a creature, right? You are just a one of the many creatures that God created in this world. Right? And when one reflects on these things, he is able to connect to that power of being humble, which really is the power of self-control. Right? Self-control comes from, right, recognizing what you are and who you are. Right? Someone that thinks that they are all it, they're the best. Because they have money, so they can do whatever the heck they want. Because they're some celebrity, so they can do whatever the heck they want, right? Because they have a nice voice, and therefore they could walk in and just take the chazan or whatever it is, or whatever talents you have, right? Or you're just full of yourself, right? So they have no self-control really. They just do whatever they want. We've all seen these kind of people, right? They bud the lines, they cut the line, they did this, they do, right? They think they're special. They think that the world revolves around them. But when you realize that, number 1, you're merely a creature, you're not the creator. Number 1, right? You're merely a creature, you're not creator. And this really comes from Perkei Avos, Ethics of Our Father, right? You should know 3 things, right? And you won't come to sit, right? Da mal malacha, know what's on top of you, right? What's underneath you, and everything's written in and inscribed in a book, right? Those are 3 things. And you should know that there's a creator. You are not the creator. God is the creator. You're just one of his creatures. You did not create your own talents. You might have perfected it. You might have worked on it, right? But if I try to draw a picture, I could try and try and try, and nothing's going to come out. It's going to be a mess, right? It might be considered as modern art, right? That's it, right? But that's it, right? Because, and I've doodled, right? It's funny about my parents. You probably are aware. If not, my parents are moving to Eretz Yisrael, right? July time, God willing, July, August time. So they're going through the house. They've been living in that house for close to 35 years, right? Or something like that. So they're going through the house. Of course, a lot of boxes and a lot of things and accumulated over the years. And my father sends me a picture of some notes. He first puts it on the family chat and then he sends it to me, right, of some notes. And there were my notes from like 6th or 7th grade, right? And then notes from 8th grade, 9th grade, really cool, right? And my Talmudic studies of learning the Talmud and notes that I was taking. And it's very interesting on the side of the notes, right? And on the binder and then all over, there's a lot of doodling, right? And a lot of trying to make faces, right? At the time, I thought maybe I could draw, right? I'm like trying to make faces and like funny kind of faces and like trees in a house and like all this doodling because I used to be bored in class, right? But that's a side point, right? So there's a lot of doodling, right? And my doodling is exactly the same. It hasn't grown, right? I have to say so. I haven't grown in my doodling, right? And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. But the point I'm trying to bring out is I could try to work as hard as I want to become an artist. I can't. Right? And maybe my doodling will become a little nicer, right? But I'm not going to become an artist, right? But at the same time, God gave certain people talents. You have to work on it, and they develop it, and they get training. They can become tremendous artists or musicians or anything else, right? But one should not think that they created that talent. That's the point I'm trying to bring out. God gave them a gift. Now, some people, God gave a gift that's just natural, right? They get on a piano and they just start playing and it's beautiful, right? Training or no training. To fine tune it, they get training, right? Some people, God gave them a gift, but they have to like be taught and then they could develop it into something great. And some people, God gave them a gift of making noise on a piano, right? But not music, right? That's just the way it is. Right? You could try to teach them and the keys and this, it just doesn't work, right? It just doesn't work. Right? So we have to remember, you're not the creator. You were created. And therefore, when we think about that, right, we have a different perspective of the gifts. We realize it's a responsibility. It's a responsibility. It's not my thing. I'm not better. God gave it to me. So it's a responsibility to use it for something good. Use it for something positive. Number 2, always remember that you are flesh and blood and eventually perish. I mean, to say you're not around forever, right? What's somebody? We're all going to go back into the earth, right? Back into worms and maggots. Yay, right? It doesn't sound very exciting, but it is, it's true, right? Lofty people, as we mentioned in other classes, have transformed their body into something spiritual, and therefore the worms and maggots don't attack their bodies, right? Because it's a spiritual entity. And I don't want to get into that. We spoke about this before, right? They had to move the Vilna Gaon, the great Gaon of Vilna, right? And someone stuck their hand in the cookie jar, and he looked, right? They told him not to, right? Because of his loftiness, and he saw the body was completely intact, right? It was like 150 years later. Right. That's, I'm not going to get in. That's a different discussion, different talk, but we're still, even that their body still goes into the ground. Right. If we become worms and maggots, depends on your loftiness. Right. But we go back into the ground. We're not around forever. And when we realize that we're not around forever, it means to say we're not invincible. We're not. Right. We're not invincible. So you think you're big and strong, or I could, throw money around, whatever. It only goes to a certain amount of time. Right? You're not invincible. So take a reality check and realize that you're not someone that's it, right? Immortal. Thank you, Jim. And then the last one, always remember that there'll be mercy for you in the future only if you have mercy on others, right? This is an interesting way of putting it, right? It's really you will be judged by God, but I like the way they put it. Right? The Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, right? Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, the Rosh Hashiva, the Mir Yeshiva, when they moved from Shanghai to Jerusalem, right? He passed away in the 80s. He passed away, I think 80 actually. right? I have a friend named Chaim Leib. That was his name. He's named after Chaim Shmulevitz, right? His father learned in the Mir Yeshiva. My father learned in the Mir Yeshiva, right? But that's a side point. I don't even know why I said that. But okay. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz has a whole essay of how it's an essay on Rosh Hashanah. All right, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. All right, how are we able to make sure that we have a good judgment? Right? Don't we all want to have a good judgment Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Right. It's our whole year is being decreed there, right? How much parnasa we should have, how much health we should have, right? Our interactions with people, right? And everything in between, right? So he says, what is a good way to make sure that we have a good gzar din, a good judgment? And he says something so powerful. He says, and I'm not going to go through the whole essay, I'm just going to bring out the point for this point over here. Says is that the concept in the Talmud, whoever has mercy on others, right? God will have mercy on him from heaven. He says like this, let's be honest, right? We're not perfect. King Solomon himself said, there's not a righteous person in the world that doesn't sin. Right? So if we're going to go in and we're going to show our checklist, good God, I did this and I did that, and I'm perfect, I'm great, right? I should only have a best judgment. God says, who are you fooling? Right? Who are you fooling? Right? I know Lashon Hara is a hard thing. Let's say you've gone to a Fagimam's class, okay, so now you don't speak Lashon Hara anymore. I wish, right? But right, at least we're working on it, right? Or you've learned the laws of Shabbat and you now keep Shabbat, right? You learned the laws of kosher and you eat kosher. You learned the laws of everything. You are learning. You're giving charity. You're giving 10% of your charity you're giving 10% to charity, right? As Harry Rothenberg said, right? After federal taxes, not state taxes, right? But after federal taxes, they said, why not state taxes? Because you decided to live in this state, right? So that's you can move to a different state, right? Right. So federal taxes, right? You live in this country, so you give 10% after federal taxes, but you do all that, right? You're perfect. Really? There's always something. We're not perfect. And we can rely on that. So there are kinds of evidence. Right? We have to work on it. We have to better ourselves. We can tell God we're working on it. We can tell God, look, we've grown from last year. We're not perfect. But says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, one thing we could rely on. Number one is, of course, showing God that we're working on it. And look, we're trying. Right? Trying is a big thing. We're trying. Look what we were last year. Look who we are this year. It's a process. God, it's a process. You created the world as a process, right? That we can't just go from 0 to 100. We're not a Ferrari, right? But it's a process. But we show God our growth. It says Chaim Shmulevitz, the Talmud tells us, whoever has mercy on others, whoever doesn't judge other people, right? Or judges other people favorably, or looks for the betterment of others, of course, within the confines of the Torah, right? You're trying to find the betterment for others, but it goes against Torah law. That's a different, you can't judge people, but, if you're an activist for something that goes against Torah law, right? That's like the example I gave, many times, if a parent asks their child to make their bed and they go ahead and do something else, it might be a nice thing, but it's against what I asked you to do, right? That's not what God wants us to do. That's not what the parent wants you to do. Leaving that aside, but as I felt set to put that in there, but we are all trying to the betterment and respecting other people and being merciful to other people. So God, when he looks at our judgment, he said, okay, checklist, you are growing, good. You have done this, but you haven't done that. But you know what? Comes in the middle. You are a person that throughout the year, right, are looking favorably at other people. You are a person that's giving people the benefit of the doubt. You are a person that is merciful to others. You are a person merciful to others, not just saying it, but doing actions, right? You go help people with their groceries. You make sure that you are helping people of needs with your financial abilities, or you are volunteering your time, right? If it's your talent that I gave you, if you're a musician, to go to the River Garden or other people that need some comfort, and you're using that time to help other people, right? You have mercy is a attribute of being kind and using what you have to help other people, right? And not judging people within the confines of what the Torah tells us we can do and we can't do. You know what? I'm going to give you another chance. I'm going to be merciful. I'm going to judge you favorably. I'm going to tell you, you know what? We're gonna give you another chance. I'm going to be merciful over here. It says in Chaim Shmulevitz that is a sure way of making sure that your judgment is worked with mercy and not with judgment, because we don't want our judgment to be with God on the chair of judgment. We want him to be on the chair of mercy. And that's what the last thing over here is also. Always remember that there will be mercy for you in the future only if you have mercy on others, right? When we are thinking of talking about someone else, when we are ready to lash out, we're ready to say something. I just need to say this. It's for the betterment of, just reflect for a second, right? Reflect for a second. Now, if it follows the rules of Toelas and you're allowed to say it, right? Remember how you're allowed to say it. Just because you're allowed to say it, there's still ways of where you're allowed to say it, who you're allowed to say it to. That's all part of allowed to say it, right? And when you do, remember, you're doing it only because you're allowed to do it, not because you need to say it, not because it's going to get a load off your chest. That's not a reason, unless it's, as we spoke about, you're speaking to a therapist, you're speaking to your spouse to get to something off your chest within the confines of halacha allowed to do that, right? But when we do this, we have to stop and reflect. And when we work on our humbleness, and that's true humbleness, right? That is truly being humble. Humbleness is not going, that's not humbleness. Humbleness is reflecting what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Humbleness is realizing that you have a responsibility. Humbleness is realizing that you're just flesh and blood. Humbleness is realizing that you have to have mercy for other people, right? Humbleness is realizing that you're not the creator, but you were created. That's all part of humbleness, right? And that is true humbleness. And when you have true humbleness, then you'll think twice, 3 times, 4 times before you speak Lashon Hara. That is one of the greatest tools that we could work on, right? One of the greatest tools that we could work on to make sure that we don't blabber. We don't blabber, right? We don't just talk Lashon Hara. We don't just say whatever's on our mind. I have no self-control. I can't. I've heard people say, okay, stop me. I have no self-control. What do you mean no self-control? Get self-control. Work on it. Right? Look. Work on it. They're working on it. Don't just, it's not an excuse by saying, I have no self-control. I'm just going to kill anybody in my, I mean, that doesn't work that way. We all have our struggles and we all have to fight. I mean, and some struggles are personal struggles for ourselves. Some struggles affect other people. When it affects other people, you have to be more on top of controlling it. When it just affects you, of course you have to work on it. What you eat, what you look at, right? How you dress, how you act. When it's just affecting you, of course, that's all part of growth. Don't say I have no self-control, right? God gave us an neshama. God gave us ways of controlling it. And God gave us ways of growing. When it affects other people, you have to be triple on top of it. Because it's not only affecting you, you're affecting other people's lives too. Right? And that's one of the greatest ways of realizing that you have a sniff, you have a sense, a smell, right, of arrogance inside of you. If you feel that you have no self, if you just lash out and I just need to say this, it's just whatever, because you just revolve around yourself. Right. And I know I talked for a long time today. Usually we do like questions and answers. I am finished with this. Any questions or comments, please? Go ahead, Suzette.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
So I have a question, comment in regards to just what we're learning in terms of Lashon Hara.
Mhm.
And this, I'm going to narrow it to, in the context of last week's Torah portion,
Mm-hmm.
when Moses was up on the mountaintop, he was given the tablets, and God said to him, the people are misbehaving. And Moses responds, don't, don't release your anger or whatever it is. I can't remember, but God is telling Moses that the people are misbehaving. And Moses is being very patient and pleading for the people, but he's not necessarily accepting that the people are misbehaving. And then when he comes down and he sees for himself that they're dancing, then he smashes a tablet. So in the context of Lashon Hara, Moses heard something, he didn't see it. He tempered the situation, but it was when he actually saw it that he responded and smashed the tablets, or he responded, I don't know, angrily or appropriately. So we know the divine cannot say Lashon Hara, but how do you explain that in the context of Lashon Hara? So Moses didn't see it, God says it, Moses tempers it, and then it wasn't until he saw it he responded. So can you just clarify that for me?
Excellent question, Suzette. Right. So let me just briefly explain Suzette's question. So Suzette is asking like this. It says in last week's Torah portion, it speaks about the sin of the golden calf. Right? And in the sin of the golden calf, it gives us a dialogue between God and Moshe. When God tells Moshe, your nation, right, is doing a chata gedolah, a big sin, right, and I want to destroy them. Moshe goes down the mountain with the tablets, and then when he gets down to the mountain and he sees what the Jewish people are doing, right, he breaks the tablets. And he gets upset in the sense of as a leader needing to discipline his people, and he goes ahead and he deals with the Jewish people. As Suzette is asking, within the confines, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with the confines of Lashon Hara, right? Of course, God created all laws. God has no evil inclination. God created the evil inclination. So if God does something, that means to say it's not in any prohibition way, right? Because he's the one that created everything. So how could God tell Moshe that the Jewish people are sinning, right? Within the confines of Lashon Hara. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
it.
So the answer to that is because since Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader, right, of the Jewish people, right? So therefore, right, it was for his knowledge and to know what the Jewish people are doing. Right, he has to. It's like if let's say there's let's say your child is doing something wrong, right? So a teacher, right, is allowed to tell you that your child misbehaved. To go ahead and now have that discussion with your child, to be able to discipline your child and to make sure that they better themselves and change and become better. That's part of education. Education is toelis, it's a purpose, right? There is a purpose in that knowledge, and therefore that is not under the category of Lashon Hara, right? Because whenever there is a purpose, and over here there was a purpose because Moshe was their leader, Moshe was in charge of them, right? So therefore God is telling him, you got to go ahead and take care of this, right? So therefore that's why God, because there was no other way for Moshe to know what was going on, because Moshe was up in heaven, right? So therefore, that's why God was allowed to tell Moshe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Now, the point you brought out, let's go on a tangent for a second. I'm not going to go too far into it, but the point you brought out that Moshe only got angry once he came down and he saw it with himself. So Harry Rothenberg, our scholar in residence this past Shabbos, He spoke about that in his sermon, right? Why was it that Moshe only got upset or broke the tablets, right, once he saw what the Jewish people were doing, and not God told him? Of course, God knows. If God tells him, right, there's that he knows it's true, right? It's not like me or you saying something, right? Even with our we know something, whatever, we could have some doubt, whatever. Really, come on, really? Okay, I trust you. You're a trustworthy person. You're first hand account, right? But if God's telling you something, of course it's true, right? So there's many different answers. He gave a very interesting answer. I'm just going to repeat it over quickly. He gave a very interesting answer that it wasn't that Moshe didn't believe God at all, right? But what Moshe said, okay, listen, everybody does an avera, right? The transgression, right? This is a really, really bad one. They're a new nation. I'll deal with it. What really got Moshe angry, and that he broke the tablets, and angry in the sense of a disciplined and realizing that he really has to do something here is it says when he saw the dancing. Right, you could do a transgression, and you're sad about it. You realize you made a mistake, and you whatever. I feel bad, or even if I don't, okay, I'm doing this in my lifestyle, whatever it is. I have to grow, or whatever it is. But one day he saw them dancing, and dancing is a way of showing that this is something that you're excited about. When he saw that their excitement was not Judaism, but their excitement was something else, right? That's when he got really upset, right? And that's when he felt that he had to, break the tablets. And that's what he went on talking about, that we have to show our excitement for the good deeds that we do. We have to show our excitement for our Judaism, right? Our kids see our excitement. He gave an example, right? That when he was a big football fan, and he got really excited about a game, right? But then, he showed his children that he's really excited about his learning also, and he left at the end of the Super Bowl, even though it wasn't over yet, right, to go study with his partner, right? That was just one example, but the point that he brought out is a very powerful point. We spoke about this in the past also, very powerful point where we have to show at least equal, if not more, excitement for our Judaism and the importance of our Judaism over our secular life. Our secular life is important. Our business is important. Our vacations or whatever it is important, right? Our sports team, right? That's not important. That's fun, right? But we have to show as much or even more excitement and importance to our Judaism than to our secular life. That was his point. But I just, since you brought that in, right, that was one of the answers that he gave. But excellent question. Thank you for asking. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
Are we doing are we doing day 83 today?
Yes. I'm gonna start that in a minute. We're gonna do 83. Excellent question, Emily. All right, so on that question, Emily, we're gonna now move to page 80 to day 83, right? So we're gonna go to 83, and that is day 83, page 240. It's an interesting discussion. I think this is a pretty straightforward one, right? But I'm gonna leave it to you guys to battle it out. All right, so just do it very quickly. Right, you're on a 3-man team or three-person team, man, woman, man, woman, I don't care, right? Team interviewing, right, a candidate for a position as a Rebbe in the yeshiva, right? Let's say Torah Academy is looking for a new Rebbe. I'm not saying they are, right? But whatever it is, right? You're hiring in your local law firm or your local banking or whatever it is that you do, right? You are on a team of not just one person, but a team that is the hiring team, right? And your neighbor's son or daughter applies for a position, right? But one of the other interviewers feels he or she does not have the right personality for this job. Whatever it is, whatever that job is, right? You need a certain personality, a certain excitement as a Rebbe or a teacher, right? A certain work ethics. If you're you're going to be an intern in a law firm, you have to be willing to work like 50 hours a day, right? I know that's impossible, but that's what interns work, right? Whatever it is, right? So for some reason, they feel they don't have a personality or what it is. After brief discussion, the principal decides, or the head of the thing decides not to offer this person the job. When the candidate's father hears the news, he tells his son, I don't believe it. I'm going to find out what happens. Right? So now you being the neighbor, he comes over to you. He knows that you're on the team. and he says, no, Chaim Yankel, what's Kashem? All right, Chaim Yankel, what happened? All right, what happened? Why wasn't my son, my tatala, my daughter, right? Yeah, we're the top of their class. Right? Could go through the whole list of what their credentials are and why they're really the best. All right, so are you allowed to tell them what happened? Say, listen, it was a tight thing. One of the people felt that there wasn't the right personality, right? Even if you don't even say the name, right? Or you say the name, right? You're not saying it's not anything bad. I'm not saying that it wasn't, his credentials didn't work or we felt that he was lacking in skills. Personality is a nice way of trying to say that you don't fit, right? Personality could be, it's not bad about the person. That's their personality, right? So are you allowed to say something or you're not allowed to say something? Okay, guys.
This is an easy one.
Okay, Jim said it's an easy one. That's what I said. Go ahead, Jim. Why is it an easy one?
It's a big no.
A big no. Okay. Anybody agrees or disagrees?
I agree.
Agree. Who said that?
I did.
Okay, Judy agrees. Anybody else?
I do twice.
You do twice. Okay, Martha agrees twice.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, Emily has a question.
Could you say, let's say you say, I'm sorry, I can't divulge information or whatever it is. Can you go to the person in charge and say, look, the kid, like this guy's father is really upset, like FYI. I'm just letting you know he's really upset and he's trying to find out more information. Like or the other two people on the team, like, could you send them a message saying, I just want you to know that Chaim Yankel's father is upset and he's trying to figure out what's going on, like heads up.
Okay, what do you guys think? Are you allowed to go ahead and now tell?
No, I think that,
Yeah, I'm assuming you're making an assumption like Jim and like Martha and like Judy and like I'm assuming everybody else, right? Unless someone else disagrees, please raise your hand. Right, that you're not allowed to tell this person the information. So you're saying if you're not allowed to tell this person the information, are you allowed to go ahead and tell the other people on the committee saying, hey, this FYI, this guy's really upset. He wants to know what's going on. Maybe you guys want to reach out to him or not. I'm just letting you know what's going on.
Well, just to let them know, not necessarily letting them, not telling them to tell him, but just saying like, just want you to know, like he may be asking you what's going on. He approached me today and he's upset. Like FYI, that's
okay.
it.
Yeah, let's get to that in 1 minute. Anybody else want to comment on our case? We'll get to that in 1 minute. Go ahead, Suzette. Bonnie, you're next.
I agree, and I do have a conflict though, and my conflict is what if the father is raising the issue because he has there's a higher purpose. And by that, I mean, simple example, what if he's like a life coach or he is someone who, works with his kids with their interviewing skills or whatever. So probably he wants to know, well, what went wrong here so that his son doesn't make the mistake again? Is he really coming from a place that you can't divulge information if it is for a better cause? I mean, it doesn't say necessarily that he's doing it with an evil intention. He just wants to know, why is it you didn't get the job?
Excellent point. Excellent point. Actually, I want to answer that. You wanted to say something else, or that was your point? Okay, excellent point. So if you remember, we spoke about this lashon hara, right? Is a two-way street, right? Just because one person has a purpose, right, doesn't give the right for the other person to either say it or listen to it, right? So the father might have a purpose of why he might want to know what happened, right? But the person that is speaking has no purpose to say what he said. And I'm sort of giving the answer, right? Has no reason, has no purpose to give over the answer. There's no toelis on his part, right? He has no reason to give over the answer, right?
Why you're helping your friend's son? How is that no toelis?
Say that again.
Maybe you're friends with Chaim Yankel and you want him to get a job. And if he understood why he wasn't chosen, then he would be able to get a job elsewhere.
So then you can go ahead and have a discussion with the son, and the team should usually would, right? Usually you say, thank you so much, right? We really enjoyed talking to you, but we really don't think that your personality will fit our team, right? Usually the team should give that information. If they didn't, right? So then you could then go ahead and tell the kid and say, listen, just it wasn't anything, or just, we felt that the personalities won't fit with.
This is the kid if he's applying for.
Right, he's not a kid, right? He's applying for Rebbe. He's in his 20s. He's an adult, right? So very nice. So then the father can speak to the kid about what it is, but to speak to the father, right? Very nice that the father might have it. He wants to take over with his kid, but you have no reason to give over the information, especially right to say who made that decision, right? That's for sure not, right? Who was it that nixed it? Right, but what the decision was, right? Why we felt that it was inappropriate, right? Then you could go ahead and tell the person that was interviewed. Yes, that is a toels. That's for their betterment. That's giving them information, right? That what works for them. They want to go ahead and now discuss it with the father. Let them go ahead and discuss with the father. Why did they feel that I wasn't my personality? What's with my personality that they felt that I wasn't? That they could go ahead and have that discussion. But to go ahead and give that information to the father, right? There's no reason for it. They could go ahead and tell the person that was interviewed, and they should. We felt that we really enjoyed it. A lot of times it's just nice talk, right? Because most people are not going to say, we thought you're a lousy teacher, your classes were terrible, your class thing was. Most times, most people are not that straightforward, right? So usually you give such answers anyways. Right, but that is a great question. But lashon hara goes both ways, and we always have to remember that. And that's something sometimes that we get very tricked up with. That even though it's a toelas, either for me to get it off my chest or for me to give the information, but if it's not for the person to hear it, right, you're not talking to the right person, right, that can do something about it, right? Or the other way around, it's important for the person to know the information, but for you, there's no reason to give it over, right? There's no way for you to give it. There's no reason for you to give it over, right? So that's where it gets tricky of toelas, right? Toelas has to be both a two-way street. Go ahead, Judy. Oh, you wanted to say something? Oh, you're just waving your hand. Okay. Okay. Yes, Bonnie, go ahead.
I think this ties in to what we were discussing last week too about feedback. I definitely agree with Emily's question that if not to the father, to the son, you should always provide feedback. And I think this works professionally and personally. I mean, myself, professionally, I've applied internally for positions and I didn't get it, but I got really good feedback that surprised me because I could have thought it was ABC and it was XYZ and they were looking at things differently. Ultimately, it's funny because one of the positions they called me and said, hey, we now have an opening now, we want you to come aboard. But anyway.
But Bonnie, that was the thing. They gave you the information. You were the person that was being interviewed and they gave you the information.
Right, not the
call Kevin and give him the information, right? They're going to give you the information. That's toelas. That's a purpose. It's just the father, very nice that he wants to be involved in his kid's life. But as Jim pointed out, we're not talking about a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old.
Right.
A 20-odd-year-old, probably 30-year-old or 27-year-old in their 20s, right? The kid wants to then go ahead and discuss it with the father, go for it, right? But the father has no purpose right now to go ahead and have that information. Information should be given to the person that was interviewed.
Right, agreed. I was just coming from the feedback point, I think is, as we're all trying to work on ourselves, feedback can be very hard, it could be very
100%.
unpalatable, it could be very unexpected because you think, of yourself is this way, and then somebody turns around and says, well, actually, you're this or that or not this.
Right.
But if it's done correctly, and you really are truly trying to work on yourself, and that person means all the good for it to help you, again, personally or professionally, I think it's
No,
important.
100%. Feedback is extremely powerful. I agree with you 100%. You had another point, Bonnie?
Pardon?
Did you have another point you wanted to bring out?
No, personally, like I said, I always said, like, sometimes I happen to be a very sensitive person, and I'm sure most of us are, and sensitivity can be good and not so good. And then sometimes I perceive, somebody may not be happy with me, and it could be, have nothing to do with me, or it could be, so I'm just saying, I would prefer if that person would come directly to me and say, by the way, you did something or you said something I wasn't happy about, and like, thank you so much, let's discuss it. See
Excellent
where
point. Thank
I
you.
could have gone wrong.
100%. Right. Feedback is an extremely powerful point. Just have to make sure you're giving it to the right person. That's what we're saying. Excellent point, Bonnie. Anybody else? Any other comments or questions?
Would it be relevant to say to the father, if your son wants more feedback, he should approach someone from the committee and sort of.
100%. 100%. That would be a nice way of saying it. 100%.
Okay.
Good point. Okay, let's see the answer, and then we'll get back to Emily's question. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay, you'll get back to it, thanks.
Didn't forget about you, Emily.
It's too hard.
So the answer is as all assumed, right? And it's good, Baruch Hashem, our brain is thinking the right way. You are not allowed to divulge the identity of the people who expressed a negative opinion. This is true even if the decision was in favor of the person in question. And the same is true of the Beis Din. Judge may not divulge who ruled against, all right, the litigator. So let's say there's a panel of 3 rabbis, right? For most money cases, it has to be a panel of 3 rabbis. If something's kosher or not kosher, you can go to your one rabbi. That's fine. Do some other halachas, right? You're allowed to laws of what's okay on Shabbat or not. But if there's a case of judgment regarding money issues or other laws, and I'm not going to get too much into the laws of Beis Din of our Jewish courthouse, but the smallest courthouses of 3 people, right? And let's say the judgment went against one person, so you're not allowed to divulge who ruled against the individual, right? You're not allowed to divulge that information, even though it's facts, it's what it is, but you're not allowed to say that. So as we said, you're not allowed to go ahead and give over that information, right? And for sure, say who's the one that ruled against your son or whatever it is. So now the question is, are you allowed to go ahead and tell the people, hey, FYI, the father is on a rampage, right? He wants to know what's going on, right? Okay, I just use excessive force, right? I'm not necessarily on a rampage, but he's he wanted to give you a heads up. So it really depends on how you say it. Right, and if you really feel that there's a concern, if there's no concern, the father might go over to those people or not. He might not feel comfortable, right? He's your neighbor, so he feels comfortable coming over to you, right? But he doesn't know the other people. It's not like a small town like Jacksonville. Everybody knows everybody, at least most people, right? But it's a larger town, Toronto, New York, Atlanta, Miami, Hollywood, whatever it is, a bigger city, right? Where you don't necessarily know the other person, so he won't feel comfortable to go ahead and ask it. He's only asking you because you're his neighbor, right? So there's no reason to go ahead and say anything. Again, there's no toelis, right? There's no reason, even though it might not be exactly lashon hara. You're not really saying anything negative. You're just saying, hey, FYI, I just want to give you a heads up. The father's asking him questions about why their son wasn't, accepted, right? But there's no purpose. There's no purpose in that question, because there's no concern that the father's going to call these people, no concern the father's going to corner them in the grocery store or anything like that, right? He doesn't know the other people. He's your neighbor. It's from a different part of the community, right? He's not that kind of person. He's just because it's your neighbor, so therefore he asked. So he was a little agitated, so therefore he sounded a little, maybe aggressive or sounded a little agitated, right? But there's really no concern. Right, so there's no reason to say it. Something this goes for any situation. If you really feel there's no reason, there's no giving info. I think it's just important for the person to know why. The other person to now think bad about the other person to be under okay. The other person, you don't know what's going to go on, and we try to say it in a sense of. I just wanted to let the father's ask, what's going on in the other person's brain when he hears that. Right, the other person's asking, he's all upset. The other person's asking. There's no reason. If there's no concern, there's no reason to say something. Why start putting things in people's brain? If there is a concern, right? If you feel that the person he's that kind of individual, right? He's your neighbor. He's that kind of guy. He's not embarrassed. He's not shy, right? He'll corner the people. He'll find them in the grocery store. He'll knock on their door, right? He'll make phone calls to the school, and ask what's going on, right? So then, yes, there is a toelis, is a purpose to make people aware, right, that they might get haggled. Right, and that they shouldn't feel, they shouldn't feel that they didn't have, enough time to process it or to be cornered kind of situation. So, but you have to be careful how you say it. And you can't say, I just spoke to the father, you know, there's smoke coming out of his nose, right, and ears, and, you know, this guys, be careful, right? You could say it that way, right? Right? Or you could just say, hey, guys, just wanted to give you a heads up. You know, this kid's father is my neighbor, right? You know, he came over to my house on Shabbos, you know, and or whatever. I was taking out the garbage, and he's inquiring about, you know, why his son didn't get, you know, accepted. I told him, you know, his son could, you know, we gave his son a reason. He could, you know, contact us more, you know, of course, right? But I just letting you know, I know this guy, you know, he might, you know, corner you in the grocery store. Just FYI, right? So then, yes, because that's the Toelis, that's for their betterment, right? But you have to make sure that you say it, that he's a nice guy, right? He's not gonna throw stones. There's no danger. You're not. He might just, you know, bother you with questions, right? You know, he might. That's the kind of person, right? That also you alleviate that what's going on with this guy. This guy, like, we have to get security, like, you know, we have, like. You have to make sure you do it in a way that you're also, if he's a danger, so call the cops, right? But if he's not, right? So then you do have to, you know, you do have to go ahead and give over some information if that's the kind of person he is. So it really depends on the situation, like most answers, right? If there's no concern, you're in a different part of town, right? It's a different community, right? You happen to be part of that community for whatever reason. Right, you're on the board of whatever they asked you, right? And you happen to be this person's neighbor, which is not connected to that community. He doesn't know the other people, and he's not that kind of person. He's, you know, he's not a shy person, but he's not like that kind of person. So then there's no reason to say anything, right? He just asked you because you're his neighbor. But if there is a concern, right, that the person might go ahead and corner them or call the office many times or whatever it is, so then yes, you have to give a forewarning, but in a respectful way, not making the person sound like a monster either. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. Suzette, I think I saw your hand up. I'll take some questions and answer now. I'm going to turn off